Welcome to Talking Eurotrash with me, your host, Brendan Murray. Between now and the end of the World Series, we'll be bringing you news and views from the European contingent at the Rio, as well as some juicy gossip along the way. This year's series has been one of mixed fortunes for Europe, with scores of players challenging for the prestigious bracelets, but only a small few realising their dreams. So far, Alexander Kravchenko from Russia, Alan Smurfett and Kieran O'Leary from Ireland, Katja Theater and Michael Kiner from Germany, and Italian Jeff Lisandro have taken down events. That's about 15% of bracelet winners coming from across the pond. Others, like Chris Bjorn from Sweden, have made multiple final tables. Englishmen Dave Devilfish Elliott and Dane Rennie Mortensen have come agonisingly close to securing a win, and players like Marcel Lusk and Andy Black are so good that they can often be found playing more than one event at a time. At today's $5,000 six-handed no-limit hold'em event, you couldn't move a metre in the Amazon room without tripping over a European player. But the big news of the day was the presence of Thor Hansen from Norway and Bruno Fetuzzi from France at the final table of the $50,000 horse event. Hansen was the walking wounded with only $40,000 in chips, and rather predictably he moved them in the first chance he got. And he lost. But he did pick up a tasty $188,000 for his marathon 4-day effort, and he put the money to good use straight away by jumping into the six-handed no-limit hold'em game. The last we heard, Fetuzzi had made it down to the last 5 and was guaranteed at least $444,000. Not a bad return for a 50k investment, so good luck, Bruno. Now, earlier today I had the pleasure of speaking with 2 of Europe's great poker players. Here's how it went down. Here with me in the studio today are 2 gentlemen with a wealth of World Series of Poker experience from Europe. We'll be discussing the topical events and random esoterica of the series. Mr. Porrick Parkinson and Mr. Scott Gray.
He's going to do the esoterica because I don't know what it is.
I wasn't sure either. I had to look it up in a thesaurus.
Fair enough.
Porrick, Europeans, we come here year after year, we get sick, we lose our money. What the hell are we doing?
I don't know. I never lost my money at the World Series. I lose everywhere else. I mean, everywhere else I go, I've lost money. But the only 2 times in the year I never lose is January and at the World Series. But I'm on schedule to break my record this year.
Yeah. Well, you and Scott often, you guys have been coming here since probably the mid-80s.
He's been coming here since the 60s.
85 for me. Porrick was in the 90s.
Okay.
He was a bit behind. I had to persuade him to come over here.
All right.
Now they can't get me out of the fucking place.
Yeah, and I think you had to persuade Scott to come over on this occasion.
Yeah.
You guys used to work off the same bankroll, working at 24 hours a day, playing cash games. What was it like back then?
Well, we mainly did okay because we concentrated on the cash games. At the start, there was a 30% tax for Irish people off the top of the tournament, so we couldn't play the tournaments, which was great because most people that go broke over here is because they're playing tournament after tournament every day, and we had a cash game strategy, so we pretty much won every time we came here. It's different nowadays. We don't have the tax problems.
But so we can do our brains in the tournaments.
Yeah. We still make sure we make sure we go home with some money. You know, we don't come over here for a vacation or a holiday. It's business. I think a lot of the guys that come from Europe, it's a big thing. They're going to Vegas and maybe for the first time, and they're partying in clubs and playing with hangovers and stuff. You know, I mean, we treat it more like a business, I think.
Yeah, we do that the rest of the year.
Yeah. For the other 10 months or thereabouts. There's certainly been a huge European interest in the World Series, increasingly over the last few years. Whenever you guys first started coming out, there were probably only a handful of you.
Handful of Europeans. That's it. For maybe 6 or 7 guys. A couple of English guys, a few Irish. There was more Irish than any other country at the start because of Terry Rogers. Very few Scandinavians, 1 or 2 stray, Thor Hansen and Chris Bjorn and a couple other guys. That was about it. Yeah. They were glad to have the foreigners coming because the World Series in that day it was maybe 100 runners. It was like 86 guys from Texas playing, and they were calling it the World Series. Yeah. So they were so happy to have anybody coming from Europe. I mean, they really looked after us. They treated us like kings in those days.
Well, somebody should tell Oklahoma Johnny about the Europeans. Look, I played the seniors event the other day. It was on my 50th birthday. If my mother had waited 1 more day, I could have saved $1,000, but she didn't, so I forgive her. But we start off the seniors tournament. It's supposed to be the World Series of Poker. And Oklahoma Johnny comes in and he starts off and he says, I'm only going to say a few words. Well, that was the first fucking bluff of the whole thing. He went on and on and on. And then first of all, we had to clap ourselves for coming. coming. I mean, that was pretty good. Everybody clapped.
Pat on the back.
We did really good. And then Oklahoma Johnny said, well, his daughter couldn't be here, but she might be here for the final table, so we had to clap her. And then Brett Maverick, he couldn't come either, but he sent a note saying that, sorry, I can't be there, see you again soon. So we had to clap him for not coming.
Because he wanted to come.
Because he wanted to come. And then we had to stand up. You know, you won't believe this. We had to stand up and sign an oath, and say an oath of allegiance to the United States of America. And well, somebody should tell Oklahoma Johnny that, I mean, the World Series isn't all about Americans. I know the Americans are the best poker players in the world, and we're just a bunch of guys that come along and fuck up the party every now and again. But then we had to sit down again, and then he started going on about a whole load of dead guys and that. And then we had to stand up and have a few quiet thoughts about the American troops in Iraq. And some guy shouts up, "Bring them home!" It was great fun. But that really made the Europeans feel at home. But I assume their green card's probably in the post and I'll be drafted next week.
Absolutely. Well, Benny Binion never would have made you swear an oath of allegiance to the American flag, I'm sure.
I'm not sure Benny Binion swore an oath of allegiance to the American flag himself.
I would suspect possibly not. Both you guys have really significant World Series of Poker experience. You've both made final tables of the main event. Yourself, Porrig, in 1999, and
It was
Scott.
easy in those days.
It was easy, yeah.
Easier, for sure, yeah.
Well, it was probably easier, but it was way more fun then. You know, the way the World Series has gone. You know, like in '99, which was the first time I played it, and for a few years after that, even the year Scott made the final table. You know, your typical table at the World Series main event was, you know, you'd have three of the top players in the world, maybe three hometown champions, and three either rich guys or people who got in out of satellites. So you could come into town in those days and play the main event at the World Series, and you could come in and take your shot, and I think that's great. But now you play the main event. I mean, it's a complete joke. I mean, you could play for 3 days without meeting anybody. So I think the event has gone way downhill. Obviously, the Bellagio event is probably. Well, it's definitely the one everybody wants to win now, because that's where all the prestige is. I mean, the World Series has become a joke.
It's probably better value now. In that
it's way better value now.
There's so much easy money in it, but I mean, you have to live to your 1,040 to make sure you cash in the thing. 8,000 runners.
Yeah, the long run has just become impossible.
It would be great if you could play once a week for the whole year, but it's once a year. How many times are you going to get a shot at it?
Absolutely. And things like the emergence of the $50,000 horse event, with all the sort of media hoo-ha about that becoming the de facto World Championship event. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's all cancelled now, because I think it's into Bruno and Freddie Deeb are fighting it out. So all the American brand names and the sponsored players are going to have to come up for an excuse why they didn't win their own event. Yeah. So it's because obviously something else will have to be the big event now.
Yeah. What do you think of the organisation of the World Series this year? There's been a lot of.
That's a funny word.
When are they going to organise it? The first time I came in here the first day, it was fucking unreal. These people were queuing up for 6 hours to pay Harris $135 in vig. I mean, how crazy is that? I mean, it's like the World Series started just by complete surprise. The Harris think, well, maybe it would be till next year. And the poker players are nuts. I mean, they put up with this bullshit. They queued up there for 6 hours to sign up to play a $1,500 tournament.
It's a fever, and Harris are taking advantage of it, basically. But they're businessmen, and that's what
absolutely. Well, I guess it's happening all over the world. We've seen a significant poker boom across Europe in terms of live poker, the development of the European Poker Tour, the Irish Open attracting 780.
We have, but I mean, the Irish Open was, they had the most runners ever in Europe for the Irish Open, and nobody queued for longer than 20 minutes. You've got people like John Dutty who've got, the real interest of the poker players at heart, running the EPT, so they're doing it properly. But and you've got the bean counters running the World Series now. I mean, the bean counters are doing a very good job. I mean, as far as Harris are concerned, because they're milking every last fucking penny they can out of it. I mean, they seem to have a 2-year plan to bust everybody. I mean, but when the accountants take over the World Series, well, that's just what's going to happen. You can't really expect them to have the players' interest at heart. And then you get a players' committee that go in there, and I mean, they advise Harris, but I mean, the players' committee is made up of all the big players. I mean, who don't give a shit about anybody else, and they've advised Harris the way that they'd like the thing done, and they never bothered looking at anything like structures and all that. So everything's come home to roost. I mean, now all the big players are going around complaining about that the horse was a crapshoot. Well, if they'd opened up their emails maybe and looked at the structures they were sent, well, they could have said something about it then, but they were just so delighted at getting everything their own way. It's like the World Series has been structured so that all the sponsored players and the guys and the millionaires can have a good time, but I mean, they made all the big mistakes. I mean, I don't really care. I mean,
In terms of American players, I suppose the upside of this commercialisation and corporatisation is we're seeing maybe more US players come over to Europe and play. That can only be good for the game, presumably.
Well, it's great. Like just for the Irish Open, Mike Sexton and Dan Harrington and a few other Americans came over, so it's great for the game to see.
You
that
had to
happen.
drag Scott out of bed to come and play that as well, or out of his dungeon.
Yeah, it's hard to get me out of the
Playing
house
some
these
American
days.
football match or whatever.
Well, I'd say that
Sport
the
on
Americans,
TV.
and any American thinking of coming to Europe, I mean, they should, because the Americans get treated way better in Europe than the Europeans get treated over here.
Yeah. And Pádraig, yourself, you're involved in a poker charity tournament for the homeless charity in Dublin, Simon Community.
Yeah, I remember.
You know exactly what it is. To date, you've had one tournament and raised about 50 grand. Noel Furlong won that, actually, an ex-main event winner, won the World Series in 1999. The year, you remember that as well, probably.
Don't get me started about that. You know, every time I go into that card room in the Rio, I got to look up at the wall and see Furlong's face smiling down at me.
And for those viewers who don't know, Pádraig came third to Noel in 1999. We'll airbrush that out, potentially. So you're hoping for a big leap in activity for the Simon Poker charity?
Yeah, we run the
over
charity
months.
thing, as you know, for the Simon community. You look after the homeless in Dublin. And we raised 50,000 last year. I mean, there's a whole bunch of Irish poker players involved in it. Like, it's not just me. And we run an event. It's tremendous fun. And, various people give us a few quid and we all have a good day out. So we were a bit stuck for a home for it this year. We were hoping to add it on to the Irish Open, but that didn't work out. But now John Dutty of the EPT and Charles Harbon from the Marion Club have very kindly told us that we can hold our event in conjunction with the EPT in Dublin in October. So that's going to be great. Furlong's going to defend his title. He'll probably win the fucking thing again. But, it's all about raising a few quid for the
It's always
homeless.
been a tradition in Ireland, in the big
Yeah.
poker tournaments, to actually give some money to charity.
Absolutely. Well, that's how the Irish Open started,
right,
ostensibly
that's right.
under the banner of, I suppose, charitable donations.
Yeah, I think the
from
Little
charity,
Sisters for
yeah.
the Poor or something used to get a few quid. But it's not just the Irish players. You know, this kind of thing's captured the imagination of a lot of our English friends. You know, like Mad Marty Wilson and all the lads from the Midlands in England. Like about 30 of them came over just to play the charity event. You know, not the main event. It was on around, and we've got a whole load of English guys definitely going to come every time we have it. So it's a real party atmosphere, and it's great fun, and so the homeless get a bit of soup out of it. So it's grand.
So much money floating around, it only makes sense. Some of it should feed back.
Exactly. Well, you've got to pay Vig to somebody. Why
Yeah,
not
yeah.
chuck a few quid in the collection box as well?
I always look
Well,
after
when you-
the
when-
Honeybird,
Well,
Jack Strauss used to say.
when you see all these guys, I mean, whose egos are about 20 times the size of their brains, I mean, throwing 50 grand into the horse tournament, they had absolutely no chance of winning it, like, unless you gave them an Uzi, like, and they probably then couldn't make the final table. You know, there's that much money around in poker. You know, it's only right that we kind of reallocate a little bit of it.
Absolutely. Well, there'll be lots of people from
A
Europe.
lot of people homeless after the World Series.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, make that point pretty much, and there'll be a lot of people, there'll be half a dozen at least, Europeans who have won bracelets and had big cashes. Hopefully,
Yeah, it's unbelievable, isn't it? Just the Germans got 2 bracelets.
2 bracelets from
Two
Europe,
bracelets
2
for
from
Germany.
Ireland as well. Alan
2 from Ireland
Swarfetch
was great, yeah.
And Kieran O'Leary, although he's I guess
He's
the
Irish,
Americans
he's
can
Irish.
claim him, but
North
yeah,
We'll claim him. Anybody
North
called
Cork,
anything, we're taking.
yeah, absolutely.
Well, you know, the Germans got the bracelets in the limit events because, God only invented limit poker players just in case the Germans won the war. or any war. So, but it was great to see. It was great to see that happening for Europe.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's something like 15% of all the bracelets have gone across the pond so far, and none of them really to big name superstar poker players as we know it. So it's great to see some of the smaller guys picking up a bracelet.
Well, it's a
winning
numbers.
few
It's a
quid.
numbers game, isn't it? There's 2,000 people in the tournament. There's 200 or 300 big names. You got 1,700 guys working for the no names as such.
Yeah.
What is a big name?
Well, Smurfit's been around a good while. It was probably a big surprise that he won it in the Omaha because, sort of looking around, the last 4 or 5 tables of that event, I mean, Alan was probably the only non-Omaha player there.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me in the least if he won a bracelet in the Hold'em because he's got a lot of experience with that. But good luck to him.
And in terms of the main event, there's again been a lot of talk about how many people it might attract this year, whether it'll beat last year's numbers, 8,000 plus, or it'll be significantly down. What way would you guys prefer to see it go? Get bigger with more players, or reduce back down to, something a bit more manageable, maybe?
I really don't care. Myself.
You're happy with the value, just?
Yeah.
It's probably great value. I suppose, I mean, if you really want to call it a World Championship, they should maybe probably have some kind of pre-qualifying or something, but it's not going to happen. You know, if there maybe 1,000 guys qualify on previous performance and everybody else plays, you know, and then 1,000 of them get to meet these guys, well, then you can have a real World Series the way it used to be, you know. But it's now possible to win the main event, you know, without really coming across too many top-class players, which kind of devalues the event a lot. But I suppose as long as the accountants are on it, that's never going to happen because they don't give a shit as long as they get the vig.
Yeah, true.
But it would be nice to see the event, you know, where the guy that wins the World Championships, I mean, can walk out and say, well, I am the World Champion because I beat everybody in sight, you know. Now the draw in the World Series sort of can determine the whole thing. You know, you could get an armchair ride the whole way to the final table. I mean, that was never possible before. So the guy that won it could say, you know, and rightly claim that he was the world champion. But you know, now when you sit down, you're really unlucky if you sit down the first day of the World Series and you know anybody at the table. I mean, it's quite likely you could look at the two tables either side of you and you don't know anybody there either. Like, I'm not saying that these guys can't play. I'm just saying.
Yeah, that's the thing. You know, you sit there at a table and you don't know any of the guys. Years ago, that meant they couldn't play. That's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
You could sit down at the table and not know anybody at the table. But 5 of them could be absolute tigers.
So you'd have a competitive advantage, obviously, knowing the guys and knowing their styles and what kind of moves.
It doesn't apply anymore, does it?
Yeah. So it's trickier to get there.
Yeah.
If you had one piece of advice, you've both made final tables of the main events, to someone like me who just rocks up out of the blue and finds himself at a final table.
Yeah, if you get ace king, throw it away.
Really?
If you get ace queen, stick all your money in.
Brilliant. Well, listen, gentlemen, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. I appreciate you bailing me out at short notice.
We couldn't get anybody else.
Well, no, this is...
It's okay, we understand.
Yeah.
We're well used to it.
No problem. What about the money?
My backup, guys. I'll see you down in the bar afterwards, guys. I've got a big brown envelope for you.
That works.
We'll be back next week with...
real guests
probably, on Talking Eurotrash, if I've still got a job or I'm still alive. So join us then. I'm Brendan Murray. Thanks for watching.